Hey, welcome in. I'm Blue, and today we're breaking down my art style. If you liked the video, give it a like, and if you'd like to see more from me, subscribe. Now, let's get to the breakdown. For this demonstration, I'll be using my iPad Pro 11-inch and Procreate. All the tools I use will be in the description of the video. I already have this canvas prepped, but I'll break down what it is I have in the layers for you. Our very bottom layer has some noise. To create noise in Procreate, click the effects button and select noise. Then you can adjust the strength of the effect to your liking. Our very top layer is a textured layer created by this brush in Procreate. You just give a big swipe and you're done. I set this layer to vivid light with an opacity of 70%. Now we're ready for our drawing. Let's create a sketch. I decided to draw my persona blue just to keep things simple. The brushes I'm using are my own custom brushes. They're based on the default 6B pencil brush. I also highly recommend adjusting your pressure sensitivity settings in your art program. This will go a long way for not only seeing the best effects out of your art, but it also helps alleviate any extra pressure you may be putting into your hand when you draw. I tend to draw very lightly, so here are my settings. If I'm being honest, I don't totally understand the pen pressure sensitivity graph, especially in Procreate, so my settings are always changing. I also recommend changing out your pen nibs every so often. Worn out nibs do affect your art, so when you start to notice things not feeling right when you draw, change the nibs. It's like in traditional art when you have to sharpen your pencils. Simple concept, but it goes a long way. I like my sketches to look very messy, so I tend to just stop at one sketch. And now we will duplicate the sketch layer. The very bottom sketch layer we will enable Alpha Lock. Alpha Lock is a layer setting. It's in a lot of art programs and it just locks the layer from being edited. The bounds are restricted to what's already on that layer, so you can't color outside what you've already drawn. So after alpha locking the bottom layer, I will select a pinkish color and recolor my sketch. The effect that this gives is a very blurry, sketchy, dreamy kind of look. I will then set this layer, the pinkish sketch layer, to color burn. Now on a new layer, I will color in my sketch with any color. I color everything in by hand since Procreate's auto select isn't my favorite. Especially when it comes to sketches, I feel like Procreate's auto select isn't really that great. I also like coloring in my base color by hand so I can better keep in mind the silhouette I'm creating. And I find it to be a really nice, relaxing part in my art process. After coloring everything in, I will alpha lock my base color layer. Then I just start adding the base colors of my character. When choosing colors, I don't have a set of rules. The only rule I tend to follow is I don't go full saturation for any of my colors. Even my white colors aren't actually a pure white, they are more of a grayish tone. I also tend to choose colors within harmonies of each other, so I move over my color wheel and my saturation just a bit. Though lately I have been trying to aim for more saturated colors because my colors do tend to be a little desaturated. Okay, review. We did some canvas prep by including the textures we wanted. We made our sketch between these textures. After finishing our sketch, we duplicated it and recolored the bottom sketch to a pinkish color with alpha lock. We then colored in all of our flat colors. Pretty simple so far. Now the best, but also the longest step in the PotatoBlu's art process, rendering. But before that, we're going to put our current layers into a group to keep things organized. Now above the grouped layers, we add a new layer. In this layer, we'll be doing all of our rendering. What do I mean by that? I mean we are painting all of our lighting, shadows, blush, whatever in this single layer. I stopped doing the line art of my art years ago, when I realized I didn't really enjoy doing line art. The coolest thing about art and developing an art style is figuring out what you enjoy doing and how you can improve these skills. You might be wondering why I draw on a gray and textured canvas. For the majority of my art journey, I drew on pencil and paper. As I further developed my skills, I started transitioning from traditional art to digital. I hated drawing digitally for a long time. The blank white canvas on my screen was always so intimidating and it hurt my eyes to draw on. So I started combining the two. I would sketch traditionally and color in my art digitally. Over time, I started to just do my entire art process digitally, but my love for texture backgrounds never went away. So now I adjust my canvas to mimic my old love of paper and pencil tools. You might have noticed I tend to jump around a lot while rendering. Part of me does wish I had a more organized way of rendering art, but I've chosen peace with my tiny art brain. Jumping around helps keep the art process interesting for me so that I'm able to complete my art pieces. Rendering also is a big help in not restricting my creative flow. I can adjust my art at any point in the rendering process, like getting rid of whole strands of hair and blending everything in. I also think I kind of forced myself to start doing digital art this way when I started using Procreate. Well, before Procreate, I used many different art apps, but the very first one I remember using was an app called Drawcast. It only had like 2 layers and no overlay settings or opacity. It was also on my tiny iPhone, but as a beginner digital artist, you took what you could get. Procreate is leaps and bounds more advanced than that app I used to use, but I had heard somewhere that you would only get a limited amount of layers to draw on, so I slowly developed this way of creating digital art. I don't know where I heard that from, but it really did push my art style into a really interesting direction. Let's talk a bit about how art style actually forms, or at least how it happened to me. So in my Get to Know Me video, I talked about how I've been drawing since I was in middle school. I used to draw comics, and that's because I loved comics. I loved storytelling and reading about the epic adventures that characters would go on. My art style at the time mimicked the comics I was reading. You learn and grow based on the things you surround yourself with. This is especially true for art and your art style. I wanted to pause halfway through the rendering process to show you guys one of my favorite things about rendering. It's the before and after you get to see when you toggle the rendering layer on and off. I like being able to see how much my art has changed throughout the rendering process. And once I get to a point where I'm satisfied with the progress, I duplicate the grouped layers and merge them into my rendering layer. So now everything is on one layer. I do keep the original group of layers just in case I don't like how things are going and decide to start over. Now that everything is merged together, we can clean up the edges and solidify our silhouette. So, I didn't really grow up on the internet. In fact, I didn't create my own social media account until I was 18. I was a good kid, and I was terrified of stranger danger. I think in some ways that really benefited my growth as an artist. I wasn't actively comparing my art to anyone else's, and I was experimenting all on my own. My art influences for a good chunk of my art journey were comic books, animated TV shows, and movies, and video games. I wasn't involved in fandom until way later, so I never got to see any fan art of the media I love. My biggest inspirations back in the day were Avatar: The Last Airbender, Teen Titans, and Witch. You can probably see all those influences in my art now that I told you about them, Witch especially. Also, don't ask me about the Witch series. As much as I loved it growing up, I do not remember anything from the actual show. I did have some of the graphic novels as well, but I mostly looked at the pictures if I'm being honest. It's actually really wild to think that where my art is now, it might be an influence to people and their art styles, like how media used to be a huge influence on my own style. I'm both honored and terrified because still to this day, I feel like I'm still learning and still growing as an artist. There are things that I'm still trying to figure out and experiment with. I'm so happy to have gotten this far and to be able to share my art with so many of you guys, and for so many of you to love it and want to know more about it. If you made it this far into the video, tell me a little bit about how your art journey is going and who are your biggest influences. Do you watch a lot of TV shows? Are you more into comics or manga? Is anime something that really influences your art? Let me know about it in the comments. Now that the rendering is done, I will do some minor editing of the finished piece. I duplicate my render layer, and in the effects settings, I select gradient map. Gradient maps are a sort of overlay that you can put on your art. It helps harmonize your colors to make everything just a bit more put together. If I'm happy with the changes, I will then merge the edited and original rendered versions together. And here is the before and after. Lastly, I will change the background color to better fit the color scheme I got going on. And that's it. That has been the PotatoBlu's art style breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like or consider subscribing if you want to see more content from me. A huge thank you to all of my Ko-fi supporters. Consider joining the Ko-fi members if you would like to see more behind the scenes and bonus content. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.